tell us your name and where you're joining us this evening. My name is Lauren Humphreys. I am Longevity Foundation's Associate Director of Constituent Engagement, and I'm joining you from Maryland. Longevity is the nation's leading lung cancer nonprofit, and we are transforming what it means to be diagnosed and live with lung cancer through research, advocacy, and support. Our partner today, Cancer Wellness Center, has been dedicated to improving lives of individuals impacted by a cancer diagnosis for over 36 years. Later today, you'll hear a little bit more about each of our organization's programs for patients and caregivers. During this webinar tonight, oncology dietitian Lori will discuss some of the most common diet myths that surround cancer prevention and treatment. Lori will walk you through the facts and bust the myths surrounding key topics such as sugar's role in cancer, the effectiveness of supplements, the debate on dairy consumption, the truth about organic foods, and the rise of fad diets. Whether you're a cancer patient, caregiver, or simply seeking clarity about nutrition and cancer care, this webinar will arm you with the knowledge to make informed decisions about diet and wellness. You'll also get helpful information about Cancer Wellness Center and Longevity Foundation support programs and resources. This webinar, like other events, is not intended to provide specific medical advice or guidance. We would encourage you to speak with your medical team about anything you hear during the webinar. Please post questions for our speaker in the Q&A at any time during the webinar and use the chat feature for general comments and feedback. Our Longevity team is monitoring the Q&A and chat in real time, and we will strive to answer all of your questions. At this time, I'd like to invite Lori and Sabina to come in for intros. So good to see you both. So Lori is a board-certified specialist in oncology nutrition at Cancer Wellness Center. In addition to providing individual nutrition counseling, Lori co-facilitates food and fitness for wellness and offers a variety of educational workshops. Lori's areas of interest include empowering survivors with reputable information, building confidence in the kitchen, and exploring how food is more than just nutrition. Savina has been with Cancer Wellness Center for over 12 years. In her role as program director, she works with the center's staff, community members, and healthcare professionals to coordinate and manage the education and wellness programs. So great to see you both tonight. Thank you for joining and collaborating with us again. And at this time, I'd love to turn it over to you, Lori, for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that lovely introduction, and welcome. Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be able to present this evening. I wish I could see you all. I really have no idea who's on, but I heard it was quite a large number of you that decided to sign on and participate this evening. So I hope to offer you an engaging hour with lots of helpful information, but meaningful takeaways about some of the information that you encounter. And you might be familiar with what I'm about to share. So hopefully, as I shared, you'll walk away with some helpful and meaningful information. Please do put some comments and questions in the chat so that I will have an opportunity to address them towards the end of the presentation. I have a lot of content to share, so I'm going to move through rather quickly, but I want to reserve ample time so that if you do have additional questions, we hopefully can address them this evening. So I'm going to start with our first slide, and hopefully you see this image here. And maybe if you are a botanist or a home gardener, you're familiar with this blooming plant. I'm going to reference it in just a few slides to sort of demonstrate a point about the problem with misinformation as it relates to diet and nutrition and cancer care. Thank you all for attending, and thank you so much to Longevity for this collaboration. I think collaborations make reaching a broader audience possible, and I really feel appreciative of that and grateful to have this important opportunity to share this information with you. All right, so on the agenda, I'm going to first start with the concern that I have and many oncology dietitians share, that misinformation is highly prevalent, and it certainly can affect our survivors that we're working with. And so they sort of become distracted by what we know to be really important for what matters in supporting their health. I'm going to review those top 5 diet myths. Maybe you've heard of one or more of them tonight, and then share some of my favorite resources that are trustworthy, reliable, accurate, timely, updated, all of the above. And they're ones that I use regularly, and I'd love to share them with you. And then, as I mentioned, hopefully some time for Q&A. So let's start with this problem of nutrition misinformation. Now, the definition of misinformation is inaccurate or incomplete information that can mislead through negligence, through unconscious bias, or even an honest mistake. So sometimes it's well intended, but it's still misinformation. Now, nutrition misinformation, did you know, has plagued us since the beginning of time. So here's a case in point. Potatoes, at one point in our history, were once thought to cause leprosy and were actually banned in parts of Europe. Could not believe it. I learned that in preparation for tonight's program. And thanks to this gentleman, I don't know if anyone's familiar with him. This is a French army pharmacist. His name is Antoine Augustin Parmentier, and he was imprisoned during the 7 Years' War between 1754 and 1763. And it was during that time that he was imprisoned that he was forced to eat potatoes, which at that time were banned because everyone thought they caused leprosy. Well, what do you know? He survived his time and he did not contract leprosy or any other disease, and he survived off of that humble potato. And so once he was released from prison, he made it his mission to prove that not only are potatoes delicious, but they're also nutritious. And in 1773, he won an award. And the award was for his research that he had conducted that proved that potatoes were a great source of nutrition, especially for those who were suffering from dysentery. So a totally different time, right, in our history. But I think if we fast forward to our more recent events, I ask you this question: do you think our knowledge or information that we encounter today is any better than what the public back in France, back in the 1700s, were encountering? I don't know. I wonder. So hopefully as we navigate the presentation tonight, you'll agree with me that we can do better. Now, as it relates to cancer care, the problem with nutrition misinformation, fortunately, since the 1980s, our understanding has evolved, and we now have evidence-based guidelines to work with individuals who are looking to reduce their risk, working during treatment, and then into survivorship post-treatment. What are those nutrition guidelines? We have them. They're based in solid evidence. Now, unfortunately, and this gives the oncology dietitians job security, most of our survivors report, according to surveys, but I would say even in my own experience, that they're unable for many reasons to follow the guidelines related to nutrition. Why is that? Well, some will say that they feel overwhelmed, and this is based on a recent survey. They feel overwhelmed by the information and by their situation. They also have reported that there is so much information that it's hard to know what to believe, right? Is it this or is it that? Now, despite this, many survivors do believe that food is significant to their cancer process. And they've said such things as, is there a food that I'm eating that's causing this? And I think that that's an important question because we don't know if it's that strong of a relationship, right? And there's semantics here. Is food really the cause for cancer? We don't think so. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that tonight. But what I'm reading or what I'm interpreting in that question is that there's some fear, right? There's some fear that something that someone ate caused their cancer. And I can confidently share with you that that is not the case ever for any type of cancer. Now, how prevalent is nutrition misinformation? There was a recent systematic review that found that of the information that's available to us on websites and social media, that most of it is poor quality and most of it's inaccurate. It's highly prevalent. So how much of it? If you were to guess a percentage, I like to ask a lot of questions to my audience. So up to 80% of the information that we encounter online or through social media is inaccurate. That's pretty astounding, right? What's more concerning is that the overwhelming majority of cancer survivors turn to the internet for information. So 94% of people who have been diagnosed with cancer report that that's where they get their nutrition information. And now it's important to point out, and I want you to self-identify here, you might be susceptible to nutrition misinformation if you feel vulnerable, if you do not trust your healthcare provider, or if you don't trust science, if you have reduced knowledge about the subject in general, if you have lower literacy, then conspiratorial thinking. If you fall into any of these categories, and I would say many people I work with right off the bat when they're diagnosed, they feel vulnerable and they're in a compromising position. And so they're likely to believe almost anything that they feel might help themselves. So please just recognize that for yourself. Now, what about emotional well-being and misinformation? So this is sort of a new area of study that I've encountered. I've been in practice for over 20 years, and I'm really excited that this is now something that research is highlighting, because I think we need to acknowledge that misinformation is problematic, not only in the physical sense as it relates to treating disease, but also in the emotional sense, right? So research has been shown that for those who encounter cancer treatment misinformation, it can lead to distress, it can lead to self-doubt, it can lead to decisional regret. And I think that's unfortunate, because I'm in the business of empowering people. And I think that food and nutrition does the opposite. It actually can take away all of these feelings. Relationships and social support can also suffer, because maybe there's some disagreements with loved ones or caregivers over what someone should or should not be eating. And there's emerging evidence that suggests that those with cancer may have over a twofold increased risk for death if they abandon evidence-based care for false cures. Additionally, addressing misinformation for treatment decisions could increase survival by more than 5 times among some cancer types. Hopefully that really is like the definitive information you need tonight, and that you trust me, and that I take my position very seriously, that I am here to share with you high level, high quality information and never to mislead you. I would be doing you harm if I was doing that. So my objectives this evening, my goal, I would say primarily, is to improve your confidence. I want you to know that what I have to share, and I can point you in directions of other places to find accurate information as it relates to some of our more common diet and cancer myths. I would love to be able to reduce your fear around certain foods, and then learn how to identify misinformation by using critical thinking. And also, I think this is a takeaway from any presentation that I offer. The whole diet pattern is what matters. And very often people will ask me about individual foods, or they single out a food as this is so great, or this is going to cause cancer. And that is not helpful. We need to look at what those foods are in the context of everything that someone is eating or is not eating. And then we can evaluate any room for improvement for someone. Okay, so the top 5 diet and cancer myths. Let's get to the good stuff, what you're all here for, right? So these are some images. We're going to talk about each of them. Some of them you may be more interested in this evening. Some of them, maybe you'll learn something from me if you haven't before. But we're going to start with the most popular myth, in my opinion. It's that sugar feeds cancer. I think I talk about this every day, at least once a day, if not more than once. So sugar feeds cancer. Have you heard this? I'm going to venture to say you have. So more than a century ago, a German physician, Otto Warburg, made a discovery that tumors consume tremendous, lots of glucose. That's the final breakdown component of the carbohydrates that we eat, glucose, compared to non-cancerous cells. The glucose, as I just shared, it's the term to include the final breakdown product from all of the different types of carbohydrates that we can possibly eat. So that includes starches, natural sugars, as well as added sugars, and they're found in foods like sweet potatoes, wild blueberries, soda. And now, of all the foods that have carbohydrates, most of you probably know this, some are more nutritious than others, right? A dietitian can help point them out too. Now, some of the foods that contain carbohydrates, while they're less nutritious, they are delicious, and they still deserve a place in our overall healthy diet without causing any harm. So does sugar feed cancer? Technically, yes. Cancer cells do like to eat a lot of sugar to grow. So that begs the question, does that mean if we don't eat sugar, we'll starve our cancer, right? That's really the common question I get. Can I starve my cancer if I don't eat sugar? Well, you know, if we think of cancer cells like we think of, they're the opposite of my twin boys. Cancer cells, they're not picky eaters, okay? Hopefully you understand that analogy. So research has shown that cancer cells use amino acids, which are the final breakdown products of protein. They use fatty acids, final breakdown product of fats, and they use many other metabolites, even decaying, dying cell matter. Cancer cells will use anything. They're like scavengers. That's what I like to call them. So if sugar is the only thing that feeds cancer, we now know that technically everything feeds cancer, because that was it's been 100 years since that discovery was made. And if we falsely assume that we can starve a cancer, what's left? What's left for us to eat? Because we now know cancer cells use everything, right? So what do we build our strong body with? How do we nourish ourselves? What food is left to eat? So here's the whole story about sugar. Scientists believe that different parts of the tumor process nutrients differently. So they'll pick and choose different nutrients, not just sugar, not just glucose. So there's already a problem with this theory, right? In addition, cancer has been shown to adapt and to alter various pathways that influence how their metabolism works. That's the hallmark of the cancer cell. It adapts. It can kind of outsmart what we're trying to do to it. So the result is a complex, very complex, and constant reprogramming, right? So it's not just one point in time, it's constantly shifting. And this is driven genetically by oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. That's heavy duty stuff, right? So researchers call this phenomenon metabolic flexibility. So even when they've tested this out, even more recently, medical interventions that have tried to starve cancer cells, what they find is that the cancer cells pivot and they adapt and they use a different fuel source. Now, so with this simple statement, sugar feeds cancer, that doesn't justify our current understanding of how complex cancer cells transform and how they alter their metabolism. It's just so complicated. So my concern as well about the misinformation and disinformation about sugar is that if we're afraid of eating sugar, this is potentially harmful because it could increase our anxiety. That's not good for us, right? It could cause us to avoid social situations where food like sugary foods are involved, like a birthday, or it could result in a cycle where we start to feel guilty or ashamed because we ate something that we were afraid made our cancer worse. That's very concerning, in my opinion. Not eating enough carbohydrates could result in weight loss and malnutrition, which is highly prevalent for some cancer types. And if you did not know, malnutrition independently predicts worse outcomes for someone diagnosed with cancer. So if you have a curable cancer, but you're malnourished, you will not do as well during your treatment. So up to 70% of our individuals diagnosed with lung cancer are shown to be malnourished at any given point in time during their cancer care. Not to mention, if we avoid carbs, this is kind of useless. What our body does is it converts the protein we eat into sugar if we don't eat enough carbs, because our bodies really like and thrive pretty well off of carbohydrates and sugar. And that's why the majority of what we eat most likely should come from carbohydrates. So what do the experts then recommend? Experts recommend that we consume a mostly whole food plant-based diet. Maybe you've heard of that. It's all the rage right now, right? Now they contain nutrients and unique compounds that we only find in plant foods. They help us build a healthy body environment that makes the spread or the growth of the cancer less likely. Now, just for your information, a plant-based diet is mostly carbohydrates, like I shared. Now, here's the thing. Experts do recommend the following, that we limit added sugars and sugary beverages. So while we're focusing on a lot of whole plant foods, we're going to still focus also on limiting added sugars and sugary beverages. Limited evidence from controlled trials show that sugary beverages or high sugar diets, now we're talking very high sugar, that can lead to inflammation as well as elevated levels of circulating insulin. And you might be familiar with some of that terminology. Now, inflammation and high levels of blood insulin levels, are far more significant than the sugar that we eat when it comes to cancer cells. You can work with a dietitian and you can help understand how you, on an individual level, can help reduce this. We have effective strategies to help lower inflammation and help lower circulating insulin, and partly that's through a whole food plant-based diet. But two things can be true at the same time, right? We can limit or avoid added sugars while still consuming a nutritious diet associated with cancer protection. I'm not saying you need to eat sugar, right? You can limit or you can avoid them altogether. I would say making that decision, it's important that you are, again, not having this fear associated with it, because now hopefully you feel confident that the sugar's it didn't cause your cancer and it's not making it worse. We can eat sugar as part of a nutritious diet associated with cancer protection and not be afraid about causing ourselves any harm. There is no single food, and sugar is included, that causes cancer. It's the total diet pattern that matters the most. And dietitians like myself, we advocate reducing excessive amounts of added sugars while limiting sugary drinks. And again, that's where consulting with one is very important. If you don't have one on your treatment team, ask for a referral. It's very important that you understand on a personal level what is recommended for you. Okay, I saw some things pop in the chat, so I can't wait to see what they might have been. All right, we're gonna move on. These are cancer fighters that the experts recommend, and these are just a handful of the many. So our experts want us to emphasize whole grains, our fruits, our vegetables, our beans and lentils. Again, this is just a handful of the so many that we can choose from. There's so many interesting compounds, including fiber, including glucosinolates, including things like polyphenols and resveratrol. I mean, they're really fancy words for cancer fighters, basically. And imagine eating a vast array of them, not just one or two of them, but a vast array of them most days of the week. Chances are you're really amping up the amount of protection from your diet, from the foods that you're eating, and it transfers over into the body. Now, specifically, I just wanted to share this about cancer fighters and lung cancer, that fruit in the evidence has been shown to be linked with a decreased risk for lung cancer. So when I work with individuals, whether they're on treatment or just diagnosed, we do talk about meaningful ways that they can incorporate some more fruit into their diet. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next myth. So this is number 2. Hopefully you're still with me after that first long-winded explanation. All right, so dietary supplements. And now moving forward with each of the myths, I'm going to flash on the screen like this image like you see here. I just did a quick Google search like vitamins and cancer, and this is what came across in my search among so many others. But this, as you see, shares that vitamins can kill cancer. Now, hopefully right off the bat, you're being skeptical about that type of information. That is just inaccurate. That's misinformation, right? And potentially disinformation as we go through this myth. All right, so supplements, here's the myth. Supplements are necessary for cancer treatment. Here's the definition of a dietary supplement. It's a product that is added to the diet, right? That's the operative word there. It's to supplement the diet. So when you need it, if you need it, right? It's usually taken by mouth as a pill, capsule, or powder. And what's interesting, I think, with dietary supplements is that there's a few myths within the myth. So some people will say supplements are necessary to help me fight cancer. Some will say that they're natural, and that word natural means they're safe, right? Some will say that supplements are necessary to boost my immune system, which is relevant during cancer treatment. Now, supplements as it relates to cancer, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a high prevalence of those who get diagnosed who are using supplements. What percentage would you guess? You want to put it in the chat, you'll get extra credit. So what percentage of individuals after they're diagnosed take a dietary supplement? 70%. I think that's pretty alarming when a third of Americans who are not diagnosed with cancer take supplements. That skyrockets up to 70%. Why do so many people take them? So as I shared, I think like within some of those other myths, a lot of people feel that it's one way that they can help themselves. It's one way that they can boost their immune system. It helps them, give them energy perhaps, or just to help out with treatment, right? Help fight the cancer. And where do they hear this information? Well, you guessed it. It's probably from friends or loved ones, maybe from social media. Maybe they're writing a book somewhere. That's what the reports are. They didn't ask their provider. They found it out from somewhere else. So the whole story about dietary supplements, the safety and lack of efficacy for supplements remains a large concern. So dietary supplements, how they are manufactured, sold, and used are overseen by 2 government agencies, the FDA and the FTC. The responsibility for ensuring that products are safe before marketing them is assigned to the manufacturer. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds right off the bat like a conflict of interest, right? If I'm intending to make a product and sell a product for profit, do you think I might make sure that it sounds like it's safe and sounds like it works? Of course, right? Essentially, supplements are available to us until they cause harm. And we have some examples of that next. So on average, about 2,500 adverse events are reported annually that are related to dietary supplements. I would say this is an underestimation because a lot of people don't recognize maybe what an adverse event is, or they don't blame the dietary supplement for that adverse event. What are examples of those adverse events? Well, reportedly, vomiting, diarrhea, shortness of breath, rashes, joint and muscle pains, blood in the urine. We might mistake this for something else, right? Not our dietary supplement. A reported 30, this is quite a range, 30 up to 70,000 calls are annually placed to the U.S. Poison Control Centers, and they are directly related to a dietary supplement. So here are just a handful of examples in our recent history of where the current way that we regulate our dietary supplements are somewhat concerning. So Saprol, ephedra, comfrey were once available. They once were used in our U.S. market. However, after significant health concerns, we now know that they are unsafe and they are now banned for sale in this country. But they were once available to us on the market. So here's another good example. So this image, while it looks really harmless, right, it's a beautiful image of a flower. This is Saprol. And in 1970, the National Cancer Institute conducted a study in about 45 people, and they had a range of different cancers, but they were all advanced cancers. And they wanted to test Chaparral tea in tablets. They were really interested in one of its main ingredients. It's called nordihydroguaretic acid. If you don't want to repeat that word, you can just say NDGA like I do. And so what the study found is that out of the 45 people, 4 people actually found that their cancer got smaller, right, on imaging. The effect of that, of what they thought the supplement created in terms of reducing the tumor burden, the effect lasted anywhere from 10 days up to 20 months. Well, that sounds very promising, right? But hold on just a minute. So in the other 41 people, the tumors progressed and got bigger. And so this review showed that it also caused severe irreversible liver damage and failure. And it also has been shown to cause kidney damage in some people. So we probably don't want to be using Chaparral, right, because of this demonstrated study. However, did you know, even though it is banned, it's still available? I don't know anyone that's taking it because I would not allow them to, but apparently you can still access it and purchase it online. So it's important to point out. So here's what the research has shown about supplements and cancer risk. There is evidence that some dietary supplements have the potential to cause harm. So here are 2 of our large trials that demonstrated this case. The SELECT trial, and that was the selenium and vitamin E cancer prevention trial. And they looked at men, and they had them take both vitamin E as well as selenium. The men that took vitamin E were at increased risk for prostate cancer compared to those who were not taking the vitamin E. Men with high levels of selenium in their body and then also took a selenium supplement had an increased risk for prostate cancer compared to those who were not taking the selenium or those with lower levels of selenium who took the supplement. So it seems like these supplements are not as promising as we once thought. And then the ATBC trial, that was the alpha tocopherol beta carotene cancer prevention trial. And this was done in collaboration with, I think, the NCI and like a cancer institute over in Finland. They did this study, and it was rather large, just like the SELECT trial. There were tens of thousands of people enrolled. And what they found in this trial is that the men who were smokers and also took beta carotene supplements, they had an increased risk for lung cancer. Concerning, right? So it didn't happen for those who didn't smoke. So there's a lot of complications related to supplements and lifestyle, and we just don't know enough yet, but we do see that there could be cause for harm. And for that reason, we apply the precautionary principle. And we generally say that dietary supplements are not necessarily known to be helpful in cancer. Now, just as an aside, and this is why working with your friendly dietitian is always a great idea, food sources have never shown to increase risk. Not of those, right? They're cancer protective, actually. And we have lots of ways to add the food sources of those vitamins and minerals to your diet. So furthermore, about cancer treatment, supplements are metabolized in our liver through a system that we call the cytochrome P450 enzyme system. That system also happens to metabolize prescriptions and treatments, like cancer treatments, along the same enzyme system. So what happens is whenever that occurs, there's sometimes competition. So if we take a supplement and we also take a drug that is metabolized in the same pathway, it could decrease how effective the drug is, and it could reduce the concentration of the drug in our system. Or the opposite may happen. It may increase the effects of the drug because it may hold on to the drug, and it may potentiate the side effects of the drug and how long it stays in your body. We don't want that either, right? So imatinib and irinotecan are among just some of the prescriptions in terms of cancer treatment that are reduced by the dietary supplement St. John's wort. Across the board, we generally recommend and advise against St. John's wort during cancer treatment. Other examples, allium sativum, Panax ginseng, and ginkgo biloba. They may also interact with the P450 system. That's just been proven through research. Now, what about antioxidants? They're good for us, right? Well, I don't know about in dietary supplement form. So dietary supplements of antioxidants have not been shown to be effective in treating cancer. And in fact, they may have caused cancer in those larger trials I shared. There's a potential for interaction depending on the cancer type, the mechanism of action of the treatment, and the type of the antioxidant. Supplements that act like antioxidants should be used very carefully for those on treatment, especially if someone is receiving a curative regimen. We do not want to interfere with a regimen that's going for a cure, right? So vitamin E, selenium, and vitamin C, as well as zinc, those are all examples. There's several others. Those are just some examples of antioxidants. So when someone is taking a dietary supplement of those, we want you to tell your healthcare team so that we can review them and advise whether or not to take them. So what do experts recommend? High dose dietary supplements are not recommended for cancer prevention. That's across the board with all of our cancer agencies. They find that lifestyle and food first for nutrition, not supplements. So dietitians very often use this expression for optimal nutrition. Food is first and supplements are second. Very often there are some exceptions when a supplement is recommended, but don't just automatically assume that you're going to benefit from taking one or that you need one. So we want you to discuss this with your care team, any supplement that you have ever taken, or if you're curious to take one because you heard you should take one, or if you would benefit from using them, right? If you're concerned and you think, do I need more vitamin C in my diet for my immune system? Just ask your healthcare team. They can give you an appropriate answer. The internet cannot give you that answer. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next myth. This is one of my favorites, so dairy. And this was another Google image that I encountered, 10 great reasons why you should ditch dairy and milk. And anytime I see a skull or a skull and crossbones, that's like an automatic red flag. But this is misinformation, right? It's not like dairy is going to kill us, right? That's the assumption here. But everything included in this image is so drastically wrong. I don't have enough time to talk about each of them, but we'll get to our myth that dairy causes cancer. Have you heard about that one? So dairy includes products like milk, such as cheese, yogurt, ice cream, butter, and cream. The supposed concern with dairy is that it's related to the hormone that's found in it, IGF-1. IGF-1 is a hormone similar in structure to insulin, and that's why it's called insulin-like growth factor. And it plays a crucial role in development and growth and metabolism. We need IGF-1. It's not a bad thing. We have it in our body and we need it. It's crucial. But too much IGF-1 has been associated with increased risk for several cancer types. And so this is where the amount matters, right? And medically, we don't know what that is, right? We have to discuss this with our care team if we're at all concerned. Milk, particularly cow's milk, naturally contains IGF-1. Now, the concentration, I didn't notice, the concentration of IGF-1 in milk can vary based on many factors like the cow's breed, the age of the cow, and the diet of the cow. Good to know, right? But here's the whole story behind dairy. Even though milk contains IGF-1, the amount that's found in milk and in the amount that we consume compared to what's in our body is so significantly lower that it's insignificant, right? It doesn't even hit anything in our body. In addition, when we eat and digest dairy, we break down proteins, and that includes IGF-1. So this breakdown reduces the amount of what gets absorbed into our body. And what we do absorb, the tiny amount that we do absorb, it doesn't affect us the same way that the IGF-1 in our bodies makes. So guess what else dietitians want you to know? that dairy actually has some beneficial nutrients to support overall health and might be worth considering, right? It's not all as bad as it's cracked up to be. So here are some of the nutrients. Calcium supports skeletal health and helps regulate cell growth and differentiation, and it potentially decreases the likelihood of cancerous changes. Did you know that? Calcium is a nutrient of concern. So most Americans do not eat enough calcium, and it's sort of on the public health agenda to try to increase the amount of calcium, not to overly consume it, but just to reach adequate amounts in our daily consumption. Vitamin D is also found in dairy, and it's required for skeletal health. It's also very important for immune function, and it's associated with the decreased risk for several cancer types. It is also a nutrient of concern, so most Americans do not eat enough vitamin D, and deficiencies are quite prevalent. So another area of concern where dairy might be able to give us some of these nutrients, right? And then dairy, potentially fermented dairy, gives us some probiotics, and probiotics are sort of a hot topic. I get asked a lot about probiotics, and they are beneficial in some instances, and maybe dietary supplements might be indicated in some instances, but food forms of probiotics are a great idea just to add some beneficial bacteria overall to support gut health, but also in turn and kind of downstream impact and support our immune system. And then there's also these compounds called sphingolipids, and they may inhibit cancer cell growth in many cancer cell types, which is fantastic, right? So there are some really interesting compounds found in nutrients and nutrients found in dairy that we don't want to necessarily discredit it. So what does the research say? Well, dairy is an example of how different foods might influence cancer risk through different and unique cancer mechanisms. So let me try to explain that in another way. We think that there are different diets for different cancers because cancers are very complex and complicated, and so are diets, right? And so we want to sort of, in terms of what the research has demonstrated so far, we want to sort of address and manipulate the mechanisms that are at play for that unique cancer type. And we might be able to do that through some of our diet choices, right? Or overall diet pattern. And dairy is a really good example of this. So get ready for this. So there is strong evidence, meaning you can't get any better. It's strong. The evidence exists now, and it has existed for quite some time, that dairy actually decreases the risk for colorectal cancer. There's preliminary evidence, so not very strong, but it's there, that there's a protective effect of consuming dairy against lung cancer. There is also some evidence, and just some, not a lot, not strong, but some evidence that dairy products in excessive amounts may increase the risk for prostate cancer. So that's the one cancer type where I may have a conversation with an individual diagnosed with prostate cancer. How much dairy are they consuming? How much dietary calcium are they consuming? And should we address that? And the final cancer type, overall, human research does not link dairy with the increased risk for breast cancer. I wanted to kind of show you examples of where different cancers require different approaches, especially with diet. Okay, so two things can be true at the same time. We don't need to consume dairy. I'm not here to say that you have to do it, right? We don't have to. We can easily accomplish the nutrients of concern through other mechanisms, through other foods in our diet too. And at the same time, we can also consume dairy as part of an overall cancer protective diet while not worrying that we're causing ourselves harm. Remember, no single food or beverage causes cancer, and dietitians advocate incorporating a variety of choices to build that healthy body, right? Now, I personally, professionally, very often will talk about fermented choices as well as low-fat dairy, which may be an important approach for individuals during treatment to make sure that they're reaching their goals that I set for them. Okay. Second to last myth, we're moving along. Okay, so organic versus conventional. So another Google image that I encountered, if you think organic food is expensive, have you priced cancer lately? This quote was from a farmer. I believe he owns like a farming corporation that sells organic produce. So as you can imagine, I think he has livestock too. So as you can imagine, he has a product to sell. and he has some very strong opinions about it. But I think this is a great example of inducing fear, where the thought is that if you dare eat anything that's not organic, you're putting yourself at risk. And that is not okay. And hopefully, if anything, when you encounter messages like this, you can at least just pause and use some critical thinking and just think twice, right? That you don't need to be afraid, that these are very strong messages that are based in fear and not based out of any sort of evidence-based guidelines. So let's move on to this debate then. So organic food is necessary, right? We have to have it if we're looking to avoid cancer or prevent our cancer from coming back or for reducing the risk that our cancer is going to progress. Well, the concern mostly stems from pesticides, and pesticides are chemicals, right, that cause cancer. Now, logically, pesticides and herbicides, they can be toxic to us, right? And they can increase the risk for cancer when they're used improperly, right? The USDA regulates organic certification on food, and you see the label there. That can help us identify which products are organic or not. So that seal verifies that producers meet animal health and welfare standards. They do not use growth hormones, and they use 100% organic food. They also provide animals with outdoor access. Now, here's the thing I think that's really interesting. I just want to point out, because I'm a huge advocate for local agriculture, that farms and handling operations that sell less than $5,000 a year, they're exempt from that certification in the state of Illinois. So if you go to the farmer's market and you ask them, what are some of their practices, you might be really pleased and want to support some of that for yourself and your family. Organic plant foods are grown without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, sewage, sludge, irradiation, or GMOs, how we define them. And here's the whole story behind organic and cancer. So organic produce may provide more vitamin C, iron, magnesium, and phosphorus compared to their conventional cousins or conventional varieties of the same food. Now, I'm here to say that doesn't mean we have to eat organic if we're looking to get these vitamins and minerals. We could easily eat every single one of those vitamins and minerals in conventional foods, as well as through other choices in the diet. We don't have to eat organic, but that is what the research shows. There's a slightly significant more content. Organic produce is not pesticide free. Did you know that? It is often grown using pesticides under the USDA's regulation. Market studies show that pesticide residues on conventionally grown foods are almost always within safety tolerance limits and could technically be classified as organic. That is really comforting to know. Now, what does the research say? So the link between cancer risk and pesticides depends on the dose. So we do know this, that agricultural workers who are exposed to, I would say, massive, and that's why I use that word, massive amounts of pesticides. They are applying the products. They may not be properly attired and be exposed to a way larger amount on a regular basis to these pesticides than we ever are. There has been a connection between that exposure and the risk for lymphoma. For the rest of us, we are exposed to trace amounts of pesticides and actually pesticide residues. So that's what's left after our body takes care of the pesticides, which are so significantly small. And there's no strong evidence that the amounts that we get exposed to are raising our risk for cancer. There's a little scientific evidence that indicates organic foods lower cancer risk, but this is a lot of times what happens in research studies. There probably is something else that's explaining that relationship. It might not be that the organic food is doing it. It might be because that person's actually following cancer prevention guidelines. They're eating more fruits and vegetables. They're eating more whole grains. And yeah, their choices just happen to be organic. But we also, even though that's a little bit of scientific evidence, we have abundant evidence. These are what our guidelines are based on, that eating a diet that includes plenty of fruits and vegetables, including conventionally grown ones, can lower risk. And that has been tried and true for as long as I've been in practice. All right, what do experts recommend? So if we're going to approach using conventional and organic produce, we do want to take care of it properly. So we want to wash it adequately to reduce any potential residues, bacteria, and other microorganisms. Food safety concerns are on the rise, if you haven't noticed. So I think especially during an immunocompromised treatment, you may want to be careful and consult with your dietitian to make sure that you're properly handling and storing and washing your produce. We want to wash our hands first. That's probably the very most important first step. And all it takes is 20 seconds with warm water and soap. Cut away any damaged or bruised areas. Rinse the produce before we peel it. And then use a scrub brush if we can to help really mechanically remove the extra pesticides or bacteria. There's no need to use soap or produce wash. That's interesting information for a lot of people that I work with, but that is what our food safety experts recommend. Using that clean brush and taking care of that brush on firm produce, potatoes, our lovely potato, our melons, and our cucumbers is important. And then for things like lettuce or cabbage, we're going to remove the outermost leaves. Okay, so two things can again be true at the same time about organic, right? We don't, and conventional produce, we don't need to eat organic food if we want to pursue a cancer protective diet. It's not necessary. We can consume conventionally grown food in an overall cancer protective diet, and we don't need to worry that we're causing harm to ourselves. So remember, there's no single food, whether it's organic or conventional, that's going to cause cancer or cure our cancer. We advocate personal choice. I do this especially. So if it's up to you, if you want to choose organic most of the time or all of the time, I support that. If you have access to it, if it's within your food budget, if it also demonstrates that you're following all of the other guidelines that the experts recommend, then sure, if you want to also include organic choices, I support that. I'm not suggesting that you don't have to follow organic choices. Okay. Our last myth of the evening, our fad diets. So I thought it would be great, of course, to talk about a keto diet. I think that's very trendy right now. But also, this is another popular approach available. This book, I think, is available anywhere and everywhere, Eat Real to Heal. And it's from a descendant of Dr. Max Gerson. And the Gerson therapy, there's a clinic out in California somewhere where they advocate organic, basically a plant-based diet, raw juices, and lots of dietary supplements. They also advocate coffee enemas. They recommend 15 to 20 pounds of fruit and vegetables every day, and most of that has to be consumed through juicing. That's a lot of fruits and vegetables, if you ask me. There has to be supplements taken like pancreatic enzymes, thyroid hormones. That sounds kind of risky, right? Vitamin B12, potassium. I clinically am obligated and ethically bound if someone is following this type of a plan to encourage them not to follow the plan and discourage the use because it is not safe and there is no clinical evidence to suggest it's an effective treatment for cancer. So if you want to talk more about that, I'll be interested at the end. Okay. And also, too, he's just a descendant of this physician that came up with an alternative diet. The other author of the book has her MA in environmental education. Doesn't sound like someone who should be speaking to nutrition in oncology care, if you ask me. Okay. So this last myth is sort of two parts. The first is intermittent fasting. And it's necessary, right, if we're going to fight cancer. So intermittent fasting involves the consumption of little to no food for a defined period of time. And they're really all over the map. It depends who you ask what a fast is, right? So it could be as short as 24 hours. It could be up to 6 days. It could be a time-restricted feeding, which I'll talk a little bit about. But a popular diet plan is the 5-2, where you eat normally for 5 days, and then you're reduced to less than 500 calories on 2 non-consecutive days. I would have a terrible time following that. And in theory, what happens if we're eating in a way that can induce this state where the body thinks it's fasting, there is an overall reduction in insulin. And if we remember, insulin and insulin-like growth factor are not things that we want high amounts of in our body, as well as glucose with an increase in ketone bodies. And this forces cancer cells to use metabolites that are otherwise in limited supply for them. So in theory as well, so this is factorial in terms of how it creates this effect. It increases oxidative stress and DNA damage to cancer cells. So it sounds like a good idea, right? Well, here's the whole story about intermittent fasting. Side effects are common. I've worked with individuals where this was the case for them. Many people complain of hunger. There is a risk for malnutrition. There's a risk for the loss of muscle, which is the last thing I want anyone during cancer treatment to experience. And there is a reduced quality of life. So there's a lot of stress associated with this way of eating, right? And or a loss of quality of life from missing out, right? I certainly would have FOMO during a celebration where there was delicious tasting food. And the other thing to point out is that you can't just like sort of do an intermittent fast, right? That doesn't guarantee you're going to put your body into this fasted state. And it's necessary to avoid excessive overeating on the non-fasting days. Now, personally, and some people I work with, they would have a hard time doing that, right? Because they've restricted themselves, and then they overdo it on the regular eating days, right? So if we overeat on those days, it's going to negate any of the potential benefits that you're looking to achieve. And caution is absolutely advised for anyone with type 2 diabetes and taking a hypoglycemic prescription. Now, what does the research say? So in animal studies, radiosensitivity was improved in mammary tumors with alternate day fasting. Kind of interesting, right? But animal studies are what we call like preclinical research. That's not what we base evidence-based guidelines on, right? So it's like a theory that we're working on, and research is evolving, and we're looking, and it's an interesting idea, but we are not there yet. Animal studies are just not the definitive answer, right? Now, during chemotherapy, not all chemotherapy types, but some of them, there may be an improved efficacy of the treatment during a short-term fast. And women with breast cancer who are post-treatment, who fasted for 13 or more hours per night, had a lower risk for recurrence. That seems a little more doable, right? Because you're probably sleeping for hopefully like 7 or 8 of those 13 hours. Now, most research suggests that medically supervised fasting regimens are safe to follow. Also good to know. But what do the experts, though, recommend? So if you are thinking about this at all, if you're contemplating about a fasting diet, the decision really needs to be based on a discussion. You have to have that discussion with your healthcare team. It would not be recommended. So a contraindication for fasting is someone who is malnourished or who is at high risk for malnutrition. So maybe you're wondering who that is. If anyone who is in the audience is diagnosed with pancreatic, lung, head or neck, esophageal, an upper GI tumor, or are diagnosed with an advanced stage cancer, you are at greatest risk for malnutrition. I encourage you to work with an oncology dietitian. If you stay on, I work here at Cancer Wellness Center to help you do just that if you don't have a dietitian. It is recommended you have one on your team, and the evidence recommends that. At this point in time, we do not have definitive guidelines that we can base off of to say that you should fast. It doesn't need to be a part of your treatment, right? So again, if you're thinking about it, I just want you to discuss this with your healthcare provider, but we don't have guidelines that when you start chemo, you're going to also go on a fast, right? The research isn't there yet. There may be more important ways for you to improve your outcomes. And even though the fast seems interesting, it seems, maybe it's giving you hope. It's really important that we don't want to diminish the effect of other very important ways that you can help yourself during treatment. And again, that's where a dietitian can help. There are definitely ways that you can nourish your body that don't include a fast. Okay, second part of this myth, keto is necessary to fight cancer. So a ketogenic diet is a high fat, moderate protein, and very low carbohydrate diet. It's like the opposite of that plant-based diet, right? So the macronutrient range on a ketogenic diet, so for those of you in the audience that count your macros, let me go back a little bit. So it's 80 to 90% fat, 80 to 15% protein, and 2 to 5% carbohydrate from calories. Wow. What I want to point out is that it's only 8 to 15% protein. So a ketogenic diet is not high protein whatsoever, because that extra protein that you consume will be used for making glucose from the carbohydrates that you're not eating. So it actually is only moderate in protein, which is also pretty risky for a lot of people who are on active treatment. We tend to recommend a slightly higher protein goals for individuals. Now, generally, healthy diets, even for those who are on active treatment, you can see the macronutrient distribution range here is definitely different, right? So 20 to 35% fat, 10 to 35% protein, and 45 to 65% carbs. So the overwhelming majority, almost in any case, is that most of the food that you're consuming comes from carbohydrates. Now, on a ketogenic diet, basically all carbohydrates are avoided, and that may include some really important cancer fighters like fruit and like whole grains, for example. And this diet will potentially supply less glucose for cancer cells and more ketones for cancer cells, which is relevant, and I'm going to share that in a moment. So here's the whole story about keto. So a medically induced ketogenic diet requires medical supervision. There are relative contraindications that you should be aware of before you even try to go on a ketogenic diet. You may have one of those contraindications and should not do a ketogenic diet. The very trendy, what I call community keto diets, they likely do not create the same state of keto adaptation that a medically induced ketogenic diet does, which means that keto adaptation means you're efficiently running off of ketones. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're sort of still working on that. It's a puzzle that we're trying to put together. Now, side effects of a ketogenic diet are common. They include nausea, vomiting, lethargy, GI discomfort, hypercholesterolemia, kidney stones, kidney damage, bone mineral loss. Yikes, right? Pretty concerning. The diet may also promote weight loss and cachexia. This has happened for a handful of people that I've worked with that have followed it. And we generally do not want significant weight loss. We do not want significant weight loss during cancer treatment. And then we also are looking to avoid cachexia. That's why I have a job in clinical medical oncology. I'm looking to avoid cancer cachexia for anyone I'm working with. Cancer cachexia is a wasting syndrome that is associated with 20% of cancer mortality. So that means that individuals with cancer cachexia, they don't die from their cancer. They die from cachexia. And we do not want to put someone at risk for that by following a restrictive diet that really has no foundation in evidence. So here's more to the whole story. So 6% of those in research, this has been found, that follow a keto diet will develop kidney stones. Very concerning. Nutrient deficiencies also are common. So selenium, copper, and zinc are the most commonly reported in the literature. The diet is so restricted that a multivitamin and mineral supplement is required. Additional vitamin D and calcium may also be added to that mix. These are just a few of recipes that I found on a website that I'm happy to share at the end if you'd like. And the website is really intended for pediatric epilepsy because the ketogenic diet was founded several decades ago as a way to treat and manage seizures for those individuals who are diagnosed with epilepsy and have treatment refractory disease. So it's been clinically shown to be helpful in that indication, right? So that's it right now. That's all we have. But now I just want to explain a little bit more about these recipes. So because maybe it's dinner time for you and you need some inspiration. So the first are some ham wrapped eggs. Now these are not just any eggs. The eggs are made with a half of cup of heavy cream because we got to get the fat in there, right? Very important. There's also a little bit of coconut oil used in making that. And then the second image, great for lunch, right? It's a lettuce like wrap and inside is some salami, but there's basically 3 tablespoons of both. And this is just this one little serving, if you notice. It's both a salad dressing as well as oils mixed together because we always have to add fat to our ketogenic recipes. And then the last one, these are chicken nuggets, because as I shared, for children, this is a common way of managing epilepsy for some. Now, these are not just any chicken nuggets. They do include chicken, but they also include more than a quarter cup of heavy cream, as well as butter and oil. That's all involved in making those chicken nuggets. So again, we're adding the fat, and that's what really distinguishes some recipes to be keto. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. So what does the research say? There's no research at present to recommend the keto diet for cancer prevention or treatment. The diet, while it has been shown to be safe to follow, however, it's only safely followed when a dietitian and someone else is medically supervising the individual who's on the keto diet. The appropriateness of the keto diet should be evaluated, right? So there are relative contraindications, and there are some who I would absolutely not recommend go on a ketogenic diet, and that's why it needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. The keto diet, as it relates to oncology nutrition, is another really good example how a different diet for a different cancer might be of a consideration. So here's why. Gliomas, which are brain tumors, gliomas may not be able to use ketones for a fuel source. So if you go on a ketogenic diet because you have a glioma, and this is where a lot of the research is, and you develop keto, you are keto adapted, where all you really essentially have running through your body are ketones. The glioma isn't happy in that situation. And so while on conventional treatment, the ketogenic diet with conventional treatment for gliomas is one area that is being looked into. That is the only exception. So gliomas are just metabolically different than any other cancer type. And other cancer cell types have been shown to actually use ketones for their fuel source. And a good example is ALL. That's a type of leukemia where in a research study, they found to progress the ALL being on a ketogenic diet. So we are not there yet, as tempting again as the keto may sound. So what do experts recommend? Diets designed to lower insulin levels, whether through a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet or intermittent fasting, they have not yet demonstrated improvement in cancer-specific outcomes. Until they do, we will not recommend that you follow them. In the future, just like treatment has been targeting specific cancer pathways, which is really exciting, we may find that there are studies that approach targeted ways to target diet and physical activity to improve outcomes as well. It's just a matter of time. We have to be patient. Research progresses one step at a time. And sometimes one study, if it's different than the rest of the studies that have ever been conducted, we need to pause and we need to ask more questions about that. Research, especially nutrition research, is evolutionary. It's not revolutionary. So when a study comes out and it hits social media or the news or the internet and it sounds sensational, it sounds like really new, exciting information, we want to pause because we have a lot of other information that may contradict what those findings are. We are clearly at the beginning of the journey to exploring how diet and physical activity can optimize cancer treatment. Stay tuned because I'm always here to try to update and give you more updated information, keep you well informed, help you, empower you, and help you feel confident about what you're doing. But time will tell, okay, what that's going to look like. So in summary, I hope you understand that there is no single food that causes cancer or it will cure it. A diet pattern is what matters most for cancer protection. So that's all the foods that we habitually eat. There's no such thing as it stands for a perfect anti-cancer diet. And that's so refreshing, right? So we can eat things like sugar. We can have dairy, right? And that's part of the overall healthy diet pattern. Nutritionists, health coaches, and diet experts are not dietitians. I can do an entire presentation about that. The best guidance is tailored to your unique situation by a qualified expert. Oncology dietitians may already be on your team. If you are working with them, reconsult them, to help you understand, are you doing everything in your power to help yourself? Our goal is to protect you from misinformation. That's our obligation, but also to empower you, right? So we may say, no, it's not true. Sugar doesn't feed cancer, but here are all the other ways you can help yourself, right? Or no, we don't want you to take that dietary supplement, but here are all the other ways we can help you. These are my absolute go-to resources that you may also find helpful. Nutrition.gov has a very comprehensive section all about spotting nutrition misinformation from you can watch webinars, little clips, easy to follow guides on how to spot this misinformation. The American Institute for Cancer Research is a nonprofit. It is the most trusted cancer nutrition resource that I am familiar with. They truly are evidence-based guidelines. The FDA has a nice website, Supplement Your Knowledge, all about dietary supplements. And the AICR works in conjunction with the World Cancer Research Fund and Cancer Research UK. So internationally, there are also some recommendations that are consistent with our guidelines here. And so if you want to read a little bit more about milk and dairy and cancer risk and that there is a lack of for most cancer types, you can click on that link. And then sometimes people are interested in the practical side of things and cooking and recipes, and some ideas there can be found on Cook for Your Life. That's one of my favorite websites. Okay. Now I know we did go a little over, so I thank you for staying on. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if we have some questions.
Lori, that was great. So engaging, so empowering. You covered such a broad variety of topics, and we did have a very engaged audience, lots of questions coming in the chat. as you pointed out, we are a little bit over time, but we're happy to stay just for a few more minutes to get some of these questions answered. We have also been capturing all of the questions in the Q&A, and Savita and I were chatting, and we agreed that we'll all follow up in the coming weeks with a blog, maybe getting into some of the topics we didn't have a chance to cover because people are just super interested in a lot of the things that you were talking about and have some questions, follow-up questions of their own as well. So,
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
yeah. Yeah, it's been great. So let me pull up the questions we wanted to bring up tonight. So there were a number of questions coming in around like protein powder, and if that's a good idea for different people with different types of cancer. I know you talked throughout your presentation about how food sources are the best sources, but what are your thoughts on protein powder?
Yes, you were a good student. So we think about protein supplements just like dietary supplements, right? We want to scrutinize the label. Sometimes what we'll do is if someone's taking one, we ask them to bring it in. I might pull up a website. I might contact the manufacturer. There are third-party testing agencies that will verify, hey, what is in this product actually is this product, and that there's no heavy metals or other contaminants that we don't want in them. So the decision to take a protein supplement is really based on, I would say, that consult with a dietitian, because you may or may not need the extra protein, or there might be easier ways to find it in your food, because food is always the guarantee that it's safer, right? And so I would say I would regard them just like a dietary supplement, and we just want to ask first.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And I think it was also wonderful in your presentation that you talked about some of the different types of medically qualified professionals that it would be a good idea to have these types of conversations with. So where like trusted information sources, and where to like to learn more. So thanks for that, Lori. Let's see. So just a clarifying question someone had, like would be considered excessive consumption when it comes to dairy or any other
Right.
food group, I
So
guess.
yeah, that's great. So I recall that in that one slide for dairy, and I spoke about prostate cancer. So we generally recommend less than 1,200 milligrams of dietary and supplemental calcium. Above that limit, that seems to be where there is a risk. So I sometimes will make sure that someone's not taking a dietary supplement that gives them too much and or is consuming too much dairy. So I generally recommend, even for someone with prostate cancer, 2 to 3 servings, as long as, again, they're not taking an excessive amount through their dietary supplements. So 2 to 3 a day, which I think for a lot of people I work with is already a lot. But you'd be surprised. I meet some people who easily go over that amount.
You. And so yeah, I think we've been consolidating a couple of questions for this part. So this one we thought was interesting. Could you share more if there are any risks of burnt food or a char on food? And then I guess sort of a part two also concerns about using oil with cooking.
Great questions. Yeah. So first, the burnt foods. With our animal foods, when we burn them and char them, and really probably the only way, at least shown in research, that happens is over a very high heat, like an open flame, right? So that's when we barbecue or we're grilling. And when we do that with our animal foods, that can create some carcinogenic compounds. So they're called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And then the tricyclic, I'm going to forget it. It's TCAs and PAHs. Of course, I can't remember. So they are potentially carcinogenic. So we generally recommend safe grilling or safe high temperature cooking. And a lot of times that may mean marinating their meat first, flipping their meat often, maybe trimming off the fat, because that tends to be what chars, right? And then also to maybe finish on the grill. So they might pre-cook and then finish on the grill. So there's a lot of options to make their grilling safer, to reduce their exposure to those potential carcinogenic compounds. The great news is that our plant foods, so if you grilled some vegetables, they do not create those compounds, which is really kind of interesting if you ask me. Like, it seems like nature gives us what we need. So those foods are perfectly okay to have. And I can share that in a blog too after our meeting, because we're coming into the nicer weather. So, and then also too with cooking. So I see a lot of information about different oils and different smoke points and temperatures. I have read some research that in the Mediterranean, they deep fry with olive oil. They use a very high quality olive oil, meaning it's fresh and it retains a lot of the protective compounds that prevent it from oxidizing. And so even olive oil with its low smoke point can be used for high temperature cooking. I think you just want to source the right type of olive oil. If you don't feel comfortable with that, I like to recommend, high temperature oil, like high cooking oils, like avocado oil is a really good example. And there's a lot of debate about seed oils. I probably could have included that in this presentation, and maybe it'll be in I don't know, another presentation, but seed oils have a reputation that they just don't deserve. And I'm very happy to share some information more about that because I think it's a very unfortunate trend right now where they could benefit our health and they're not harming our health.
Yeah, truly, Lori, I think that people would be happy to stay on all night and keep learning
Okay.
from you, but we can definitely follow up with blogs, maybe, find time for another webinar. We really appreciate all of your expertise and insight tonight. But we can go ahead and move into the next part of the webinar. So we'd like to invite Savina back to talk a little bit more about the wonderful programs and resources you all have at Cancer Wellness Center.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you everyone for staying and hanging on with us today. My name is Savina Chacheva. As Lauren mentioned, I'm the program director at the Cancer Wellness Center. We provide free services to anyone impacted by cancer and their loved ones. Each year, we see over 2,000 participants and their families who are impacted by cancer and provide a variety of free services, including education like the webinar that we had this evening. We also offer a variety of wellness classes like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, nutrition, and more, and then provide clinical support. So we do have licensed therapists on staff who offer individual, family, child, and couples counseling, as well as support groups for men, women, young adults, and those bereaved. If you would like to learn more about the center, please visit cancerwellness.org, and I will put the link in the chat as well as send it in our follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sabina. And now I'd like to take just a couple of quick minutes to talk about Longevity's programs and services for patients and caregivers. So we'll send all of this also in the follow-up email with some links so that you can easily access anything we've talked about tonight. And I did want to mention too, Lori shared some really great resources in her last slide. So we'll make sure that we capture those in the follow-up email as well. But Longevity, some of Longevity's programs include our patient gateways, which will guide you through your lung cancer diagnosis, help you find a specialist in clinical trials, and connect you with a community of other people with your type of lung cancer. We also offer free educational materials available for download on our website. If you're a healthcare provider, you can order printed copies for your clinics, and they come in English and Spanish and a number of Asian languages as well. We have weekly virtual meetups on a variety of topics, whether that's a specific lung cancer type. We have special meetups for caregivers, and then we'll do meetups with experts where it's a very intimate, like Q&A, sort of similar to right now, where you have access to experts who can talk about a very specific topic that will help you live well with lung cancer. We have a longevity helpline that offers free support and can for patients and caregivers. We also have online communities. And we hope you'll join us in Bethesda, Maryland, where I'm based, May 2nd to May 4th for our annual Hope Summit Survivorship Conference. We'll include all the information, all the links, everything you need to know in the follow-up email. We are so appreciative of your time today, for hanging in there with us. And especially thank you to Lori for sharing such wonderful information and knowledge just to help you live well with a cancer diagnosis. We are here for you. We hope to reconnect soon. Please do stay in touch and keep an eye on your inboxes for the follow-up email. Take care, everyone.